The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Master and Commander Far Side of the World, where we will discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in this 2003 movie. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas Sanjurjo. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Dom. It's good to be here.
And Jack Baruzzini. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Dom.
I should say, ahoy! Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Be sure to retweet it on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and be sure to send us comments and leave feedback online, wherever you find us. I want to tell you about another show on the network that I'm sure you'll enjoy. We have StarQuest produces a show called The Secrets of Doctor Who, where Jimmy Akin, Father Corey Sticha, and I talk about Doctor Who in both the classic, starting in 1963 up through 1989, and the new, the 2005 to present day Doctor Who, plus Audible audiobooks versions and all the other media that it came in. So check it out. We've been doing over 200, I think it's up to almost 200 episodes now. I can't remember exactly how many we've done, but we've been doing the show for over 7 years now, where we're talking about Doctor Who. So lots of Doctor Who to talk about. And if you enjoy Doctor Who at all, this is definitely for you. So check it out at sqpn.com/Doctor Who or wherever you find podcasts. So let me give a quick recap of what happens in the movie, in case you're not familiar with it. If you haven't watched the movie, I suggest you watch the movie first and then listen to the podcast, because we're going to spoil it for you.
Mm-hmm. Would you believe my wife had not seen this movie? I had no idea. I was surprised.
Jack was saying, you said your wife hadn't seen it either?
Yeah, no, she watched it for the first time last night.
Yeah, my wife had read the books and we had seen the movie with me before, so she was well versed in it herself. But let me give a quick recap. And again, there are spoilers, there are twists and turns in the story, so you'll hear them if you keep listening. But here it goes. It is the age of sail in the early 19th century, and the British Empire is holding back the inevitable tide of Napoleon's conquest over Europe and eventual and impending invasion of England. Jack Aubrey is a British naval captain aboard the HMS Surprise, His Majesty's ship, with orders to hunt down the French privateer Archeron, going from the South Atlantic around the southern end of South America and into the Pacific to the Galapagos Islands. Joining him aboard ship is his best friend, Stephen Maturin, a landlubber, half Spanish, half Irish Catholic surgeon who is Aubrey's friend and is also a natural philosopher or naturalist as well. That's kind of a recap, but not really. I mean, it's kind of, there's a lot that happens, and we'll talk about it as we go through. But and
I have to say about this movie, it's one of those movies where you watch it and you really get a feel for the way that a book about the Age of Sail works, which is it's action-packed, it's exciting, and a majority of the movie, nothing's happening.
Right.
There's no major combats except for at the very beginning and the very end.
Well, in fact, that was one of my things I was going to say about the pacing of this movie. There's long, slow moments of quiet. Just things are happening. Mm-hmm. Sailors are working, or the ship is sailing, or whatever, or even becalmed, and then punctuated by intense violence. And that kind of if nothing else, the breadth of this movie really gives you a sense of this is what life at sea was like. Long periods of monotonous duty, the ship's officers getting drunk at dinner, and singing and playing music, and then short periods of intense violence battle. So yeah, that's a good point. Like I said, it's a 2003 movie. It was directed by Peter Weir, stars Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany, based on the series of books by Patrick O'Brien, the fans call it the Aubrey Maturin series, 20 complete novels, plus a 21st unfinished novel published posthumously. And so I've read all of the books. Thomas, have you read the books too?
Yes.
Okay. But
absolutely.
Jack, you said that you hadn't, right?
I have not read them, no.
Okay, so it'll be interesting to hear the different points of view. I'd read the books before I saw the movie. Same with you, Thomas. Okay, so
Same with me. Yeah.
I came into the books with into the movie with a particular point of view toward the story and the book.
And this is also one of my favorite genre areas of fiction. So I've read all of the C.S. Forrester, Horatio Hornblower series.
Same here.
Love Naomi Novik's take on it, where there are dragons instead of just ships. So I definitely love this era of fiction.
Nice.
The Temeraire series was fantastic. A really great riff on the Napoleonic Wars with dragons. So before I get into the story, I wanted to tell a little personal anecdote that of the ship that stars as the HMS Surprise in this movie. So there's a real ship, a real sailing ship that they use for especially the shots at sea. They also built an exact replica in a giant ocean tank on land for some of the storm and battle scenes. But the real ship was a ship called the HMS Rose. They've actually since renamed her Surprise, and she's based out of San Diego, I think it is. But before the movie, she was based in Rhode Island, and she was called the HMS Rose. And I saw her one morning very early when I was living in Salem, Massachusetts. I was walking down by the harbor, and there she was, this beautiful, square rigged sloop. I think it's sloop. I have a hard time keeping some of the exact terminology right, but she's a square rigged vessel and just beautifully up by the pier. And I like near dawn, and so I went and grabbed my camera, film camera at the time, and came down and took a whole bunch of pictures. And just I was so enamored of this ship. She's just so beautiful, and I've always loved the sailing ships and the tall ships. I remember going to see them when I was a kid in Boston Harbor during Op Sail 76, which was one of the first tall ship gatherings where they bring the ships from all over the world. So I just had to share. Like, so for me, this sort of thing just hits all the buttons. And in fact, this is one of my favorite movies, Master and Commander. It's right up there for me. Definitely
up there. And it is a brig, not a sloop.
Thank you for checking that out for me. So one of the things I want to well, first let me just get your overall impression of this movie before we get started. I've given mine about how much I love it. How about you, Jack? What is your overall impression of this movie to begin with?
Something I really like about this movie is that, and this is more of a retroactive look at it based on how movies, like how Hollywood has changed since this movie came out, is that it's part of it's based on a 20-book series of novels, but you don't need any other context going into this movie. Like, you get the little opening that you know about the Napoleonic Wars, but the premise is really, really simple, and I like that. It's just they're on this boat and they're trying to get this boat, and you don't need to know any of the background, really. The movie informs you about what's going on, and it's not like so many, like, I feel like if this was made nowadays, it would have been part of like a multiverse kind of thing, that they're like a cinematic universe is how that would have been. And I like being able to just go and watch a movie and not have to think, oh, have I seen the other 6 movies that tie into this movie? And is this movie just a transitional movie to the next in the series?
Right.
So I like that it's just self-contained and it's a good, solid story.
Yeah. Thomas?
Which I would love 20 more of these.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would seriously watch 20 more of these, but I agree with you. It does what it needs to do from beginning to end without bothering to over explain itself. It doesn't need to, and it takes itself very seriously in that. All the actors give every single actor on the screen gives a phenomenal performance.
Oh yeah.
And just buys into the world wholeheartedly, really sells their character and what their character is about. And it fits the themes of the book. Like, they took all 20 books and condensed it down into what are the best scenes that really encapsulate who Aubrey is, what the sea is like. And they put it all on the screen all at once, and it sailed perfectly.
Nice pun. Well, and I will agree. Like, it's nice that it's a self-contained story. Although, if someone wanted to do a streaming series based on the Aubrey Matterman books, I would not be opposed to that. Let me just throw that out there.
Well, if anyone's interested, it ran a long time ago, but there was a Horatio Hornblower series.
Oh,
that was
We own that.
Ian Grufford was the main actor. Yeah. And it's phenomenal. And this is why I was so stunned that my wife had not seen this movie, because we watched every single one of those. We watched all of these other like Age of Sail movies or TV shows and things that had come out. And I'm like, how have you not seen Master and Commander?
Have you not seen the best one of all? Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So, all right. So one of the things I wanted to you talk about the acting is top to bottom is so good. And I wanted to mention, like, one of the things that struck me that the movie did for me that, I don't know, the books tell you this, but to see it on screen, the officers are so young. That's one of the things that really strikes me. And this is true to the reality, is that, you know, so much of the officers on this crew, and in fact, I think in the books, Jack Aubrey is under 30 in command of this ship in the early books. I mean, it's such a lot of the sailors were old salts, but the officers were generally, they started them at sea at 11 and 12 as midshipmen, and by the time they were 16 or 17, they were lieutenants. It's just, and that comes out in this, which is really good. And in fact, the age becomes an important issue for one of the young officers, because he is not all that competent and has grown to be an old lieutenant, and which actually is again an element from the books that came up.
I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Maturin is talking about the young Lord Blakely, and and he says, well, his father will understand if we have to take his arm, and the response from Aubrey is, oh, his father would understand if I had to lash him. It's his mother I'm worried about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And right, he's Lord Blakeney. He's aristocracy, whereas Jack is not, and none of the others are. So he's got it's an interesting look at the class position within the two different hierarchies within the Navy versus the ranking of society and aristocracy. So that was really that was interesting. And in fact, that gives the director an opportunity, by the way, the youth of some of these officers, to explain stuff, nautical terms or stuff having to do with battles, to the audience by explaining it to them, or to Stephen Maturin, who is, like I said, a landlubber. So those very convenient characters for explaining stuff that needs to be explained to the audience. I thought that was really good too. So we have this. You mentioned this first battle. So the movie is really bookended by these battles. And they have this first battle in the fog, which is just so great. And the ship comes out of the fog, and the violence of action just so suddenly, it just comes out of nowhere, almost literally. And it establishes this in the battle. It establishes what we need to know about the personalities involved. We see Jack as a decisive captain who is a master of his own ship, and who is a lucky Jack. The different officers, like I'm gonna need to remember all the names. I forgot to write them all down.
I pulled up IMDb just for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. I usually do that. The one who that I was talking about before, the lieutenant who is too old to be a lieutenant still, Hallam. His indecisiveness and inability to act when the moment called for it, and it was the other midshipman who took charge for him. You see all of these personalities, and then you have the French captain, who we never see until the end. We'll get to that. But the French ship is this cipher. It's a thing. It's dehumanized. It's just this monster that attacks out of the fog, this comes from the sea and attacks. And I just love how they establish so quickly all of these things. It's so great.
Yeah, and it's really neat that they get the whole feel of the Age of Sail right as well. As far as from all of the readings that I've done, it definitely nails that concept that things happen very quickly, but then it leaves out some of the important maneuvering that happens, which is that first action happens very quickly, but it really would have been a longer period of time. So it would have been like, a 15 to 20 minute period of them combating each other with the ships turning and things like that. But they cut it in such a way that you see the action happen, and then you experience that movement much more quickly than it would have been in real life, which is good in this case because you need to kind of progress with the story past that point.
And I think the way the story is completely self-contained just on the surprise. Like, you don't get any characters from the French side, so there's no like, you're seeing two different perspectives back and forth. I really like I like how they do that because it gives you that feeling of isolation that they had. Like, they were cut off from everything. It's not like they could, send a telegram even. Like, they're completely cut off, and it's like its own little world.
Yeah, and they're also very good about talking about the other ship. It's not the other ship's crew. It's not the other captain in most cases. It's the other ship and what she's going to be doing.
Right.
So I also want to mention another key thing that happens that is an important element to the whole movie, which is the music. And the music is surprisingly a key to also the books. Jack and Stephen in the books, the whole thing starts with them meeting at a concert, and it was a funny interaction between them, right?
Yeah, that Maturin doesn't like the way he's keeping time.
Yes, Jack is thumping
if you're
his
gonna bother
hand.
keeping time, just stop.
Right. And so a big part of the books is that they play music together on board ship. And one of the things you expect from a movie about a warship at sea is like stirring, John Williams-esque music, and you get some conventional soundtrack music, but you also get a lot of this beautiful chamber music, orchestral music for cello and violin, Boccherini, and this sort of stuff. And in fact, I have the soundtracks. I bought the soundtracks years ago. This actually it was on a couple different discs. It's called Dinner with the Captain. So you had the soundtrack itself, but then there was supplemental, which had all of the orchestral and classical music, and it was really great. But it lends this air to it in some scenes, which is just soaring and or fun, like a day at sea in the sunshine with the wind blowing through the sails, like, is just an amazing thing, and I love the music. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
But as Mr. Killick would point out, you can't dance to any of it. So that's no good.
Which you can't dance to it. Killick is one of my favorite characters, I have to say.
The music is definitely, I think, a big part of what sets this movie apart from other similar movies. Is it's got that unique feel, and it's like really, really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's it lends a layer of depth to the characters too. He's not just a sea captain. He's there's more to him than that, which is was pretty good.
Well, and I think it ties into that speech that he gives them before they attack the French vessel. When in the end, when he says, "This is England," England is under attack, and this is England, and that's kind of it's their own little microcosm, their own little world that they're living in.
Right. Wherever this ship goes, that is it. Wherever the flag of England flies, this ship is England for that purpose, and so defend your country while you defend this ship. That was a really interesting point of view there. That speech. The after that first battle, it's interesting. Very early on, Lord Blakeney gets injured and has to have the amputation. And there was this really nice moment between Jack and Blakeney in the surgeon's in the sick bay, where Jack gives Blakeney a book about Nelson from the hero of Trafalgar. And for those who don't know, Nelson is the uber hero of British naval history. He is was the greatest and died tragically. At the height of his heroicism. And one of the things they don't point out, but they kind of show you, Nelson also lost an arm in battle, and so Jack was trying to. It shows that the captain could be as much of a father figure to these young men, and it's kind of was mentioned before, as he is, a captain and a teacher and, a superior officer, but he was also kind of a father to them as well. And I really liked how they showed that.
That's one of the things I thought the movie did such a good job at that I was really not expecting it to be able to, was the caring about the characters, so that when some of them die inevitably in the battle, you really feel it. It's a punch in the gut. And then that final moment when Aubrey turns over the command of the Acheron to Pullings, it's you want to cheer. And it's, I mean, Pullings is on the screen maybe 20 minutes total over the course of the whole movie, but you still really feel like he's an important figure, and you cheer for him, and such a good fortune for him.
And I think Peter Weir, he does this in his other movies too. Like, he's fantastic at like showing and not telling, and also conveying so much without like giving you like big long monologues or voiceovers or things like that. Like he tells you so much in these scenes. Like, they're so densely packed with characters and information that even though like the movie feels shorter than it actually is, I feel like, because of the pacing, but it just has so much packed into it.
Right. And
my 4-year-old who was watching this when the movie was over, he's like, "That's it?
Yeah,
it's done."
It was
like,
only
watch that whole movie, buddy. It's
it was over 2 hours. You know, and you're right, Jack. Like how Peter Weir manages to make us care about these characters and imbue in them this life, this more than is on the screen, these relationships that are greater than what's on the screen. You really see it in the characters by the end of this movie, and just lots of little subtle things. Like one of the big themes from the books is how Jack is a good guy with big flaws, big character flaws. And one of them is he loves his wife Sophie, but isn't exactly faithful to her in both heart, mind, and body throughout the series. Let's just say it. And he conveys all of that in a very brief scene where you see he's written a letter to Sophie, and then he's standing at the rail when they're in Brazil and the natives are selling stuff to the ship, and he sort of stares at this young native girl who smiles at him, and not a word is spoken. He doesn't, leave the ship to go have a dalliance or something. It's just implied. And you see it all there in that brief moment. And it is so well done that you don't need to see any more to understand something about Jack Aubrey's character. It was really well done.
Very much so. I agree. And I think like in that scene too, the only reason he's broken away from that is because someone says, "Put that woman down." One of the other sailors.
Yes. Yeah. That's the other thing, is the humor in it. There is that subtle humor throughout. Yeah. Which is really good. There, of course, so Stephen is the other half of this pair. You had Captain Jack and Stephen. Now, I love Paul Bettany, but in the book, Stephen Maturin is short and slight. Paul Bettany, I think, is taller than Russell Crowe. It's a bit of a miscast. But apart from that, I really like the Maturin of the books. It doesn't really come out in this, but the Maturin of the books, he is not a sailor. He's sort of picked up by Jack on a whim, in a sense, to become. He's a physician, an actual physician. Most ships of that era did not have. In fact, one of the sailors mentions it. He's no surgeon, and at the time, a ship's surgeon was a guy who knew how to wield the saw when necessary. No, he's a real doctor, a real physician, and but he's also a rebel who hates the British crown. Is a loyal, a Spanish. Not a Spanish, a Castilian loyalist, right?
I was going to say he's an actual anarchist. Like this is an actual, in all seriousness, an anarchist, because the region that he is from is an anarchist region of Spain, and it's one of the only successful anarchies to ever have existed in actual reality. So that's his. He is a Catalan through and through, and that is his thing. Right.
And so he's an anti-royalist, but because Spain is at war with England, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But he's half Spanish, but he's also, or half Castilian, Catalan. Sorry, but he's also half Irish, which makes him hate the English even more, which makes it so deeply ironic that he's the doctor aboard a British Royal Naval vessel, which is awesome. But it's his friendship with Jack that helps, that he overcomes that. But you see that tension in Stephen come out in the movie, in the times when he gets angry about the Jack pursuing the French vessel, and especially in violation of his promise to him to visit the Galapagos Islands and give him a chance to do what he loves, which is the naturalism.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's I love that relationship that comes out in that, and we see who Stephen is. Also, one of the great scenes is when Stephen is trepanning the old sailor. So the old sailor gets injured, and so he has to remove part of his. It was trepanning was they would remove part of the skull to expose it to the air to relieve pressure. Apparently, I guess, and so he's doing this in the open air on the deck, and all of the sailors are gathered around to see this thing. Is that his skull, doctor? I mean, is that his brains, doctor? No, it's just some dried blood. That's his brains. Ooh.
It's like a medical auditorium, right? And he's just holding a medical procedure for them to be able to watch.
Yeah.
Very clearly modeled. Like the scene was modeled on that. I think that it was a clear idea. So
and then again with the humor when the bosun comes by and kicks them all out and says, "Get back to work. What are you doing?" And then he turns around and looks himself and watching.
What's that? So let's talk about Mr. Hallam, the poor, ill-fated Mr. Hallam. From the beginning, he doesn't seem to know how he fits in this crew. So he's not very good at what he does. It's clear that being an officer and taking command, he doesn't know how to lead men. At one point, there's music. The men are singing on deck, singing Spanish ladies, and he starts singing along, and they all stop and stare at him. And if you don't understand anything about this world that they're in, it looks weird. Like, why are they being mean to him? But it's an officer did not sing with the men in their sea shanties. That was not an officer thing to do. There was a clear separation between officers and men, the officers and sailors. So what do you think of that? Just that first part there.
I think it does a great job of, like we were just talking about, with showing so much without really showing a lot, is that you get that whole like hierarchy on the ship in that one scene. Like you understand it completely. And I think that it really sets his character up to be this odd man out, where he doesn't really fit in with the officers because he's not really, doesn't have any really drive. And then he doesn't fit in with the men because he's an officer.
Right. And they end up not really respecting him because he doesn't command. He doesn't know how to command. And they begin to think of him as a jinx. They call him a Jonah, which is a nice biblical reference. The story of Jonah and the whale, and it was Jonah was trying to escape from God's mission for him and sailed on a ship, and a storm came up, and they determined that it was because of Jonah that God was punishing the ship, and so they threw him overboard, and that saved the ship. And so they look at him as a jinx. As Stephen says, sailors, right, from captain to the lowest seaman, are all superstitious guys, very superstitious. So
and I think that one of the other really neat things that they do here too is they show the relationship between Jack and the crew, and how much the crew respects him, almost in juxtaposition to Hallam. And it's good because it sets up that difficulty. And then when Jack calls him in to have the discussion with him later on about how to lead, it hits home because you see that Jack is the leader of all of these men, including the midshipmen and the lieutenants. He's in charge of all of them, and he doesn't lead just because he's the captain. He leads because they respect him.
Right. And you can also see in that moment how Jack is struggling to teach Hallam. Like, Jack is a good captain and is good at training, but there's a point at which he just can't get through to Hallam. Hallam just doesn't get it, no matter how he tries. And that's an interesting counterpoint to a lot of our culture today, which is if you just try hard enough, you'll be successful. And it's like, you know what, Hallam will, if given not the rest of the events of the movie, but say he survives, he would grow and become an old man as a midshipman. I think, as Jack warns him, you can't be an old midshipman your whole life. Like, he just he's reached his ceiling. He's not going to get any better than this. And I think Jack kind of realizes it, doesn't really hold it against him. He kind of he has sympathy for him, but doesn't understand him, and he's kind of other from Jack as well. He's not like Blakeney, who has a long career ahead of him apparently.
Right. Well, and it's I think what Jack ends up saying to him is it's an unfortunate matter, and that's like all he can come up with to end the conversation with him is it's an unfortunate matter. And it's like, oh, that's right. I just fell dead right there.
Yeah, it's like the I'm not upset, I'm just disappointed line.
Right.
Yes. So then they have they're trying to get around the Horn, the southern tip of South America in Tierra del Fuego, and it's the weather is notoriously, it's just famously bad, and many ships have foundered there, and they almost foundered. We can talk about that in a bit, but I want to finish the bit with Hollom first, which is that they finally get around. Then a man dies. They get on the to the Galapagos. The doctor gets shot. They blame Hollom as a bad luck. They get becalmed, and again they blame. The muttering begins. They're just sitting there, no wind, so they're just becalmed in the ocean, and that's a bad situation. They give a couple hundred men in this little boat with nothing to do except steam, literally and figuratively. And at one point he realizes, or he just decides, I am the Jinx, I am the Jonah, and he's sort of at peace. Walks up on deck, says goodbye to Blakeney, picks up a cannonball and steps over the side. And as if to prove that they were all right all along, the very next day the wind comes up, and their luck is turned. And so what do you think of this whole progression for Hollom? Because it's tragedy, and yet there's a bit of relief on the part of a lot of people after he's gone. Well, at least we don't have to deal with it anymore. I'm really sad he's gone, but we've lost the Jonah, and now we're kind of saved. What do you think?
I like that it shows the reality of interpersonal relationships. You're on this ship and you're with these people in close quarters for months and months. Even if something bad happens to a particular person who you're not fond of, I feel like this is, even though it's not the most prettiest side of human nature, this is how people handle those things a lot of the time.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah, and that isolation, that's one of the things that the books are so good at capturing these men being away from everything for months, sometimes even years on end, and they go a little stir crazy, and that's especially with the becalming. There's some scenes in the book where they actually haul a man for during one of the becalmings just to keep the crew from kind of mutinying. They take a man, tie him to ropes, and then run him under the ship.
Keel haul him.
So they just pull him all the way under the ship and then back up on the end. And that's just it's a tradition that they go through, which is horrible, because if you know anything about these ships, they have barnacles all over the bottom of them, so it's absolutely horrifying knowing what's happening to that poor guy. But yeah, the what they had to go through, and there's a point in the movie where they even have Maturin and Aubrey discussing the grog and whether or not whether or not Aubrey should stop giving the grog to the men. And Aubrey's like, what do you think's going to happen if I take away the grog? The only thing that these guys are actually enjoying on this ship.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think's going to happen to them?
Yes. And in fact, there's that discussion between Maturin and Aubrey, and Maturin is opposed to the harsh discipline because a sailor disrespects Hollom, hits him as he walks by, and that's just rank insubordination. It just cannot be abided. And even though it's a sailor everybody loves on board and who Jack has sympathy for, he has to be lashed.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack is mad that Hollom didn't say anything. The guy hits Hollom and walks by, and Hollom says nothing. And it's Jack who has to clap that man in irons. And so Stephen goes to Jack. It's like, no, you can't do this. This is, this harsh discipline, the war. And he criticizes the punishment. And Jack just basically says, men must be governed. You can't, your anarchist ideals are fine for you, but they will not work in this situation. This human nature is human nature, and this would dissolve into savagery aboard this ship if men were not governed harshly under these conditions. So, which was I thought it was a great speech. I thought it was a great moment in that.
Right, and I like that Maturin is kind of like he's Jack's friend, but he's also his foil in his ideals. Like they're very polar opposites in what they actually believe, and it's nice to see that those like that thought like, is this discipline really like the most on the up and up, the way we should be treating people? Like truly, like maybe not, but you understand just the way the characters are and the like these conversations they have, why this is necessary to maintain a functioning ship.
And you don't get to see it in this movie. You understand it, I think, by the end of the movie. You really do. You feel like these guys know and respect Aubrey, but he is a great captain.
Yeah.
Very sympathetic, incredibly goes very far out of his way for his men. And so for him to call the lash, that's a big deal. Like it's not something that he enjoys doing. And you definitely get that sense in the books. And you see in the movies that he doesn't want to do it as well, but there are much worse conditions for them to be under. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I like how it juxtaposes the way he treats the men with the way Hms does, is because even though the guy ends up getting lashed by him, he still respects Aubrey because he's a strong leader. He doesn't respect weakness.
Yes, and Hallam just doesn't understand the leadership required. He says, "I tried to make friends with them. They don't want to be your friend. You are not their friend." You know, and so he just doesn't understand that relationship. I do want to highlight something Jack says after Hallam's death, and they have a simple service. He's going to read from the Bible, and it turns out it's the Jonah passage. Like, I'm not going to read that. But he says, the simple truth is, not all of us become the man we once hoped we might be, but we are all God's creatures. And I'm like, wow, what a simple and beautiful truth. Where in that moment, you know, he says to all these people who had been calling him a Jonah, and perhaps to himself, who thought of him, Hallam, as the Jonah, no matter what he might have been and what he failed to become, that we would respect, he's still a son of God in that moment, and was beloved of God. I mean, that's another thing I love about this movie, is we get moments like this, which are true to the time and true to how people of that era would believe, and how some people today still believe.
I like that. And on that same kind of note, I like that this movie does not try to make any sort of political, societal like statement of like what is going on. Like, it's not, are the French the bad guys or are the English the good guys? It's just these are the characters. This is the situation they're in. This is what is going on. I like that there's no commentary coming into it.
There's no 21st century ideology being imposed upon this movie.
Exactly.
Upon this story. Yeah, no, I agree. That's not true of most things today.
Except for one, which was really brilliant. I liked the way they did it when they were talking about the evolution issue, and they addressed it with Blakeney and Maturin, and Maturin says, "Well, of course, God is the one that causes them to change, but I wonder if they might also change themselves." You know, like because evolution's not a thing, and since they're going through the Galapagos, and that's Darwin's big thing, that it's a really appropriate to bring that up at this moment.
Right. Yeah, they did. Did God make them change? Blakeney says, and then Madden says, "Oh, yes." He doesn't say maybe. He says yes. But did they also change themselves? And that is a nuanced approach. That is really nicely done. So I wanted to go back a little to that to a couple of really nice moments. I loved the night chase when the French ship got behind them and was chasing them, and it's a bigger, faster ship than they are, so it's gonna catch them, and they just need to make it to nightfall. And once they make it to nightfall, they create this decoy, which I thought was brilliant. I love it. So it's basically just barrels with a cross tree and a sail on it, and lights in the shape of the lights on the rear of the Surprise. And then they send the young midshipman down to his first command, quote unquote.
His first command, yeah.
And they have him, like, they douse the light and reveal the light on the decoy at the same time, very cleverly, and then send it off sailing in one direction while they sail in the other. And it was just another one of those times where it highlights the brilliance of Aubrey's strategic mind, his ability as a sea captain. This is what makes Jack so great, is he's so smart about these things, and then brings his ship over hundreds of miles in the at night, right up behind the other ship. Like no GPS, no, he was dead reckoning it right into behind the other ship, and I just it was really awesome. I love that scene.
And you get to see him do some of that. I love the way that they show him doing some of those calculations where he's like moving his fingers and on the map to show that he's calculating how far the ship's gone and where they've gotten to. It's really neat to see all of the stuff that builds into what one of these naval captains would have been like, and it comes out on the screen so well.
Yes, it does. Another moment that really highlights him as a captain of his men is in the storm around the Horn when I can't remember all of the sailors, but I think it was Watney who had been on the in the rigging, and when the topsails went over and he went overboard with it, and he's stuck. He wants to save this man. Like he doesn't want to lose a single man, not to sea. To battle, that happens, but not at sea like this. And he wants to bring him in, and but the sails are still attached to the mast is still attached to the ship by the rigging, and it's become a sea anchor. And it's going to drag the ship sideways and sink her and lose everybody, lose the ship. And so he has to take this moment where he has to cut it free, and he does it himself. But he also makes the guy's friend, I think his cousin, I think it was, do it with him. They did it together. Like, I'm not making you do, like, I'm going to put myself through this just as much as you're going to go through this. We're going to be the ones to do it, and I hate to do it. You hate to do it, but we have to. And in this, you'll understand why. And it just, without a word, conveys all of this in this one scene. And again, just a masterful piece of direction there. I love that bit of scene. Sacrificing the man to save the ship. So they do go to the Galapagos because that's where the British whaling fleet is, and it makes a tasty target. And Stephen gets to go gaga over the bizarre species that are there. And you get this idea, again, they don't spell it out, but if Stephen really had been able to gather all these species and bring them back, Stephen would be Darwin. Like Charles Darwin would have been superseded by Stephen Maturin, if that were a real person. So, and so they have these scenes where he's seeing all these crazy creatures. No, lizards don't swim. That one does. And stuff like that. So it was just really a great scene. But then Stephen gets shot. So Stephen and Jack argue over Jack's broken promise. We have to chase the ship. It's our duty. This is a British naval warship. We have a duty to chase this French vessel. And Stephen, kind of doesn't get it. And they have a falling out. But then when Stephen is shot accidentally by one of the Marines, who doesn't use good muzzle discipline, that man should have been brought up on charges. Jack turns away from chasing the French ship. He's just almost got it, but he has to turn away because they got to bring Stephen to dry land in order to do a successful operation to get the bullet out.
Because the surgeon's mate can't do it on the rolling boat. No,
he has no idea what he's, and in fact can't do it on the dry land either. And Stephen has to operate on himself, which is an amazing scene. Like just the idea of no anesthesia, and he's like, okay, retract the rib, and I'm in pain watching it, going, oh my gosh, that must hurt so much.
I also like with that scene, like they don't show like any of like the actual surgery. Like you get little glimpses of it, but the most of the shot is just on his face as he's doing that, and you get everything you need to know just from that, like how awful that must have been, and the reactions of like the surgeon's mate and Jack. Yeah, like Jack is there. He's got like, I can do this. So I've seen plenty of wounds, in my lifetime of service in the Navy. And you can see on his face, it's like, oh, that's not good, that sort of thing. That's an experience you won't soon forget, and that I think a lot of people of the men on board the ship respect Stephen even more after that. And then Stephen wants to thank Jack, and I love the understated nature of it. He's like, oh, what, Jack, I can never repay you, and he's like, oh, just name a shrub after me, something prickly and hard to eradicate. Which I thought was good.
Which now in the books, I think Stephen actually discovers something in one of the books and names it after Aubrey.
Was it the
in a very
tortoise?
similar.
Yeah.
I think it might have been. Yeah.
Yeah, Tortola Aubriensis or something like that. Yeah, which is what he says he will do in the movie. So now that they're back on the land and Stephen has to recuperate, they decide to take a break and spend some time there. And so Stephen does get a chance to go across the island and make some collections with Blakeney and his servant. I don't remember his name. This big dude carrying everything. And they get to the other side. It's not a very big island, not very wide. And so Stephen sees the French ship in the harbor, and there's this great moment on Paul Bettany's face where you see him looking, and you really get the sense, I could just turn around and say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's that clear idea on his face, and then within a second he's like, but no, I have to do this. This is my duty, my friend. Yes.
Yeah.
And they have to drop everything and carry Stephen back.
And I like at that part where they put all the cages down with all the animals, and he specifically requests to open up the cages so they're not stuck there.
Right, to not kill them all. Yeah, that was good. And so the chase is on again. They decide that they can't catch the Archeron. They can't beat them in a fair fight, so to speak. So they decide to disguise themselves as a tasty prize, as a whaler. And I love that scene where they're disguising the ship. And there's one point where all the officers are put on these like whaler, clothes, and Jack says to them all, "No more saluting, no more sirs, no naval discipline, men." And they says, "Yes, sir."
Yes, sir.
and he just kind of turns like, that was funny. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, and I really like in that too, because I think that, you can say, oh, well, that's not a fair fight, but they do a couple of things here that are really good for that whole naval concept, because subterfuge like this was very common. It was actually really a large part of naval battles, where you would run up a flag that would keep someone away for whatever reason, or like a plague flag would keep people from coming at you,
right?
Or you would run up the flag of an opponent's nation to fool them into thinking that you were part of that. But one thing that Aubrey does before he launches the attack is he has the men raise the colors. They all take off their cloaks to reveal who they are. They raise the colors, and then they commence the attack.
Right.
Which, it's not enough time for the French vessel to get away, but it's at least giving them a heads up. Hey, we're not who you think we were. Yes,
it gives them a chance, a small chance, but it gives them a chance. Yes, they do fire when the enemy knowing who they are. It's a great battle. I mean, it's really, the brutality of naval warfare at the time was just like I mentioned it early on. It was so brutal, like cannonballs just flying everywhere. And it's not just a cannonball. When a cannonball hits the wood of the ship, that oak splinters into these missiles. It's like flechettes flying everywhere. It was brutal. The scuppers flowed with blood. In fact, they showed that at one point. And then they have to board the enemy vessel. They grapple and board, and it's swordplay and pistols and bashing people. It was quite a scene that they filmed there, I have to say.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
The grenades, man. The grenades are awesome.
Yeah, dropping the grenades down on in the decks down below. And then Stephen ends up getting in the battle. That was kind of awesome. He gets into some sword play with Blakeney.
Which is horrible. It's so funny because he's fencing. Like, it's really that scene is really incredible. As a person who knows swordplay, what you're watching there is the difference between someone who theoretically knows how to fight with a blade and a bunch of people that know how to fight with a blade.
Yes.
and he's doing all the fencing moves, and they're all actually like piling in on him and pushing back against him and everything. And it was really well done, because you could actually see, like, even if you don't know what's going on, you could see that he doesn't really know what he's doing. And if you know what's going on, you're like, oh, he's totally doing the theoretical thing now.
Yeah, he's totally like he's in a competition as opposed to fighting for his life. Yeah,
exactly.
The big difference.
I like how you see the inefficiencies of like early muskets and stuff. Like when they're getting prepared, like they have like barrels of muskets, and each one is essentially single use. And like once the muskets are gone, it's back to swords. Like so, you're not gonna use his guns for very long.
Well, and there's a reason the pistol grips were shaped the way they were, like like they sort of bulb out on the end, because you'd flip it around your hand and it became a club.
Yeah.
And it's one shot and then now it's your club. And speaking of, the primitive of the time, the reason that Stephen was fighting was because Blakeney, who had been given command of the surprise during the boarding, saw the French were starting to aim their cannons at the side of the surprise, which would sink her while they were trying to take the ship. So they end up, blowing a hole in the side of her and then boarding there. And so it's Blakeney and the surgeon's mate and Stephen, and like they throw a bucket of water onto one of the cannons to douse the fuse, and then the surgeon's mate ends up putting his hand in the flintlock to prevent the cannon from firing, which was painful but brilliant.
Yeah.
That was a good move. So that was such a good move. And then at the end of the battle, an action to take a ship ends when the captain surrenders the ship, or whoever is in command. And so Jack ends up going down into the ship's the sick bay of the French ship. He sees a guy in the French captain's outfit, and we haven't seen the French captain before. He sees him laid out there, and the man he assumes to be the ship's doctor hands him the captain's sword, etc., and go off. And we find out later, once Pullings has taken the Archeron off to become a prize somewhere, Stephen sort of reveals in an offhand, like, "Oh yes, too bad the ship's doctor died." What do you mean? Like, I talked to him. No, he died weeks ago.
Yeah.
Turns out that was the captain. And then at that moment, Jack is both horrified and also delighted, because this guy is just such a great enemy to me, and it just kind of sums it up right there, that whole emotion in him. So I just kind of love that sequence.
Yeah. There is one part near the end, speaking of the captain, that I really like, because you don't see really, the French are not characters in this movie for the most part. They're just the unseen menace. But there's a small bit of humanity that you get at the end when Jack is going through his cabin and you see his French horn is on the floor and his music's on the floor. And so you see that he gets that connection. Like there's still that connection there between them. Yes,
the French captain also enjoys music and playing music, and you kind of get the feeling that maybe if the French captain, had survived, well, he did survive, but if he knew he had survived and had taken him captive, there might be the three of them playing music in Jack's quarters, on the long sea voyage night. It would be, given that it was a more civilized era, when the way you treated your enemies, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lack of othering that was really interesting, because when they're talking about the combat, it's always the ship that they're talking about. They're talking about her, the Acheron. They're talking about that as a whole, and it's not until that moment where they board and actually have to fight that they are confronting an enemy that's another human. And at that point, it's just self-defense and trying to complete the mission.
Survive.
And then once they do survive, there's even that they take prisoners, and they're going to take those prisoners back and probably ransom them when they get them back along with the prize.
Right. And prisoners are treated with respect. They're, especially officers, treat other officers respectfully. And even if you're kept captive on land, you are given parole, which meant you could walk around town and live like a regular life. You've agreed, I'm not going to try to escape, and that sort of thing. You've given your word. It was a very different time. So obviously a lot of the sailors die. The ship master gets killed, Alan. The newly minted lieutenant, start with a C, Camley, I forget his name, but one of the midshipmen who had been just promoted dies, and then they have a funeral service. They recite the Lord's Prayer, and then Jack says this prayer, which I thought was really awesome. And I wrote it down. He says, "We therefore commit their bodies to the deep, to be turned into corruption, looking for the resurrection of the body when the sea shall give up her dead, and the life of the world to come, through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen." Which is actually a prayer that you hear today when they do a burial at sea as well. And I just thought, again, another moment where the men of faith, these were men of faith who had a belief, and I give credit to the filmmakers for portraying their faith as it was. It's really, really nice moment. So Is there any other things you guys wanted to mention that I didn't bring up here?
I wanted to talk about the really profound moment at the end that you kind of get unless you understand what exactly is happening here. The Acheron's a much better ship than the Surprise. It is a vastly superior ship to the Surprise. And so when Aubrey opts to let Pullings take that ship back as prize, he's doing two things. First off, he's solidifying his position as captain of the Surprise. That's his ship, and he is telling his men they did a fantastic job, and he's well within his rights to take the Acheron back, and that would probably promote him to captain of the Acheron almost immediately,
right,
on getting it back. But instead, he sends Pullings because Pullings won't become captain of the Acheron, but he will become captain. He'll get a captaincy by taking that prize back and getting it back and that's an incredible thing. Like trying to explain that to my kids this is a really big moment where he is saying, you have done such a good job as my lieutenant. I want you to be a captain. I think you're going to make a fantastic captain. You go get on the big ship. And that's why Pullings is surprised initially when that happens, because what Pullings is expecting to happen at that point is that Aubrey's going to go captain the Acheron back as a prize, and then he's going to give the temporary captaincy over to Pullings of this one, and he doesn't. So it's a big deal. And you get that in the books. You get a lot. You understand kind of the hierarchy of where what a lieutenant is and why it's important that a lieutenant be given an opportunity like that, and what a magnanimous thing it is that Aubrey's doing. So I love that kind of stuff.
And Pullings gets to be captain of the Acheron for a long time. That's going to be months before they get back. I mean, he's like you said, and it really does. He once he's made captain of the Acheron, it's not like a necessary that he become. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why the ministry, the Admiralty back in England could, they can sometimes say no, but if Pullings is at all a good officer and has it all time in service, which he probably does, given the implications, he's captain and he'll be given a ship. And the Acheron, that's how they did it back then too. Like when a warship was captured, it was made into it was a French ship was made a British ship, and it was this is now Her Majesty's ship. There was no. It would be kind of funny if we did that today. We capture like a Chinese frigate and made it an American frigate. That'd be a weird thing. Anyway, so that's actually a really good point. It was a big deal what he did for Pullings in that moment. And then all the officers below Pullings, which at that point, was it Blakeney was the only one left? There were some younger guys.
There was at least the second lieutenant, and so Blakeney would have been lieutenant too.
Yeah,
and
then there were a couple of younger kids who were midshipmen as well. That were there that they showed. Yeah, that's the thing is they didn't show all of them. They didn't all have speaking parts, but a ship like that would have had a lot of midshipmen kind of for that reason.
Yeah.
Because death and promotion and that sort of thing.
And just kids like Blakeney, he's going to have to go home and make a case for why he should be able to keep sailing after he's lost an arm too.
Right.
He doesn't need to be. He doesn't need to be sailing at all. He's a lord's son, so.
Yep. Yeah. Probably second son, which is why he's at sea, or second or third. But the other thing you mentioned, like Jack's position on Surprise. Surprise was his ship. Like he loved Surprise. It was an older ship, not old, seasoned. And there's that great exchange.
She's in her prime.
She's in her prime. But he served on that ship. Was it like at one point they show this was when Captain Jack carved his initials as a midshipman into the crow's nest. That this is a ship that he's connected to, that he's been on the decks of for so long. So that was a nice moment where he doesn't want to leave Surprise at this point. So
but a couple of other things. Watching this with my kids, it was really cool because they had a lot of really interesting questions. So the sextant, they wanted to know about how the sextant was working and how that was them able to tell time from the sextant and someone calling noon and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The hourglass always shifting. We were talking about the hourglass
always
shifting.
Yeah.
And then my daughter was like, wait a minute, are you serious? They count knots? That's where knots comes from?
Oh, yes.
They were counting the speed of the ship. And I was like, yeah, that's actually how how these terms came to be, and how we use them now is because of that when they were doing it.
6 fathoms by the keel, shales and shells, like the shales and sand. I love that the real true aspects of the nautical, the seamanship there. One of my favorite jokes from the series of books, by the way, is how Jack loves that there's the watch standing system is a 24-hour, like they stand watch, but one of the watches is a short watch. So what is it? 6 on, 6 off, 6 on, 6 off, and then 2, because that way no one watch has to stand. It rotates the watches around each day. Anyway, the one at the short watch is called the dog watch because it's curtailed. I crack up every time. I make that joke to my kids all the time. And like, what are you talking about? They'll have to see the movie, read the book.
Nice.
I do love the nautical.
That's like the Weevils. That's like the Weevils joke from
the lesser of two Weevils. Oh, what was it? A man would as soon as pick a pocket as make a pun.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was great. How about you, Jack? Any other notes on this?
Not really. I think I've said everything I want to say. It's a fantastic movie, and I wish that more movies like this were made, where you get these awesome stories. They're historical dramas, and they're not having an overlay of 21st century thinking put upon them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. Complete agreement. One little note, or 2 notes. First, the movie was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Film and Best Director. But because it came out in the same year that Lord of the Rings: Return of the King did, it lost against it. It won Best Cinematography, which hands down, yep, and Best Sound Editing, which the sound was good in this. The other note is, according to Wikipedia, in June 2021, a prequel film was announced to be in active development, maybe telling the story of how Jack and Stephen meet. Now,
interesting.
That's probably not going to be Peter Weir directing it, so...
Or Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany. I mean, they're young looking, but I don't think they could shave a decade off of that.
They're going to have to recast, but yeah, I mean, I want, like I said, I would love to be more Aubrey Maturin, but it has to be done right. That's for sure.
Be Chris Pratt and Tom Holland.
Actually, like,
I'm in. That's not bad.
That isn't bad. I could perhaps do it. Chris Pratt's a little too comic. I wanted a little more seriousness out of him, but we should do some fan casting for the movie. We'll see.
Yes,
what we come up with.
Prequels.
All right, awesome. All right, I think that should wrap it up for this time. As much as I want to keep talking about Master and Commander again, we do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, including Nancy H., Marie M., Sam E., Vincent H., and Jorge C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you think of Master and Commander: Far Side of the World. You can let us know by commenting on the show posting at sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page, or send an email to secrets@sqpn.com. Until next time, Jack Baruzzini, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Master and Commander.
Thanks, Tom.
And Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you as well.
It's been a pleasure.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest.